Hey everybody, this is Jason Hignite, co-producer of Sinister Nights and the director of the Sin Film Festival here in Miami, Florida, and you are listening to The Graveyard Show.
Welcome to The Graveyard.
And welcome to another edition of the Graveyard Show Podcast. I am your caretaker, and the graveyard is open. Well, I hope you're all having a good summer as we're entering the dog days of summer, as they call it. We're going to be talking about Sinister Nights coming up in September. If you live in the Miami area, well, it's coming your way. Jason Hignite is going to join me in just a moment to talk more about that. Now, Jason, more importantly, of course, because it's always about me and the show, Jason is the very first returning guest from the original Graveyard Show podcast. So that's very awesome and a thrill for me to reconnect with an old friend of the program. Now, you can still find that interview. It is here, and you have to go all the way back to Tombstone number 7 when Jason was joining me on the program for the first time. He was the event coordinator of the Vampira Tribute. And, well, you know, take a listen to that as well. I'm actually going to talk to Jason a little bit about that here as well as we look back on that awesome event. In the meantime, if you'd like to reach out to the program, you could do it the old-fashioned way. Email gyspodcast@gmail.com. gyspodcast@gmail.com. And if you are on the Slasher Horror app, you can follow the show on there. The handle is @Graveyard Show Podcast. @Graveyard Show Podcast is where you can find the program on Slasher. Stay tuned. After the interview, I will get into some details about the newest episode of Catacombs of Horror that is now available on the Graveyard Show Podcast's YouTube channel. And if you're not familiar with that particular show, I will get into that more on the other side as well. But in the meantime, as you hear in the background, a new grave is being added as we welcome a friend back to the program. My guest is here, and it's time for me to get to work. Miami's first horror convention is coming as Sinister Nights comes to the James L. Knight Convention Center in Miami, Florida, September 3rd through the 5th. And joining me now is the co-producer of Sinister Nights as well as the director of the Sin Film Festival. Jason Hignite is back in the graveyard. Jason, welcome to the show.
It's been a minute, sir. I'm glad to be back.
It is awesome to have you back here. I mean, the most important thing about this interview is that you are my first returning guest from the original run of the Graveyard Show podcast back in 2009 and 10. So this is fantastic. And back then, I know, right? It feels like you said, it's been a minute. It feels like it's like 12 years have gone by like that. It's incredible. Mm-hmm. So Vampira, I just want to kind of look back on that really quickly. Vampira Tribute. You and your team did such an amazing job on that event. It was such a moment in time. Looking back on it from now, where does it rank as far as an event for you?
I mean, that ranks high, for life accomplishments. You know, to do something at that level and. That moment was great, but what it started, I mean, the next year we followed it up with a tribute to Zachary and had even more horror hosts show up than we had for Vampira. So a lot of hosts showed up saying, man, I wanted to come last year, but I couldn't miss this year. And then the Zachary tribute turned into us initiating the Horror Host Hall of Fame, which is still running strong. We've been nominating and inducting not only horror hosts, but also a category that is called the Behind the Screens. So those who make horror hosting what it is. You know, for instance, our first inducted class, we inducted Tim Conway because he was a writer for Ghoulardi, the original Ghoulardi out of Cleveland. So what it spurred was something that is still living and breathing today. Where it's at now is we are looking for a physical location to house the Horror Host Hall of Fame. And I've been through everybody, including, Ripley's Believe It or Not. I was with them for a couple of years trying to find out a location, just didn't pan out. Looked at a museum, a monster museum in Salem, Massachusetts. They kind of ran out of room. Right now, my fingers are crossed, and I'm not making any promises, but my fingers are crossed for the Smithsonian Institute.
Wow.
This is such a big part of American culture, and I'm trying to make the pitch that this is a truly American thing and a huge part of American culture that it deserves, even just a small, I'll give you a closet, I don't care, but I want to be able to have that represented in the Smithsonian. That'd be fantastic, and I'm working on getting those connections now. But again, no promises, but that's where the gears are turning right now.
That would be so awesome. And it's one of those things that when I resurrected this show a few years ago and started posting old interviews from the show, I kind of did them in certain phases. I had a little plan how I was going to reintroduce these interviews, and when I got to yours in the horror host phase, and going back and bringing those shows back, one of the things that is just incredible and I think is so underrated is how important horror hosts are, like you said, in American society, in American culture. This is one of those things that is truly an American thing where it has permeated not just nationally, but it has such a regional influence on so many people over so many years, and based on the Vampire and the Zachary tributes and how popular they were, it just goes to show you, and how a lot of that still has followed after that. It just goes to show you how important a lot of that is.
Oh, absolutely. And there was nothing else that really curated old B fantastic horror like Horror Hosts. I mean, there were titles that I was exposed to as a kid growing up that I would have never seen otherwise. If either Sammy Terry or Dr. Creep or Fritz the Night Owl, which are the three horror hosts I kind of grew up on, if they didn't show Shriek of the Mutilated, I would have never seen Shriek of the Mutilated, So it's a very important thing, and that's why I'm really trying to do what we can to make it a permanent stamp in the history of American pop culture, and there's no better way to put that stamp on history than to get something in the Smithsonian. So we're trying hard.
Well, that is awesome, and I cannot wait to hear how all this progresses over time. I'm really looking forward to that, and certainly, once I'll have you back on once we get a resting place for where this is going to be. So in the meantime, I mean, a lot of years has gone by in between Vampire and Zachary to today. What have you been up to? How busy have you been?
Well, so I mean, gosh. So the last time that we talked, I was with the Dark Carnival Film Festival, and the Vampire tribute was something that we did, and then kind of sold the Horror Hound guys on it, and we did it with them. But I have stayed with horror film festivals this entire time. I ended up. After we did our events with Horror Hound, I ended up becoming the director of the Horror Hound Film Festival for about a decade, and then I ended up. Horror Hound kind of exists in the Midwest, between Indianapolis and Columbus and Cincinnati, largely. But I ended up moving down to Southeast Florida a couple of years ago, and started looking at, what's down here in Southeast Florida? I just moved here. I'm a huge horror fan. Where's my stuff? And come to find out, there are a lot of horror fans down here, but there's not a lot to do if you're a horror fan in Southeast Florida. So ended up meeting a guy who ran a meetup group, a horror fan meetup group, and realized I got to meet other people like me, so use Meetup for that, right? And we started talking. Come to find out, we both had a love of horror conventions. I worked with Horror Hound for years. He ran professional wrestling events throughout the country for many years, so he knew how to throw a big event. And wheels just started turning. Now, we were supposed to do this last year, but COVID, so it all got moved to this year, but that gave us just another year to plan things, and it's good because when you bring Miami its first horror convention, this is Miami, and Miami expects things a certain way, and I'm kind of glad we had that extra year to really polish and finesse. But we got a couple of weeks and it's coming. So I hope Miami's ready. I hope we're ready.
I know. I was gonna say, I hope you're ready for Miami. I mean,
right.
Miami is pretty awesome, and you can throw a really good party in Miami. That's for sure. So, I mean, for those people out there that may not be privy to how things work in terms of like putting an event together like this is one of the things I love interviewing folks like you who do this, to get the nuts and bolts of how something like this gets created, right? So here you are, you get to Florida. There's nothing like this there. You decide to, go and do this. So how do you exactly, where do you start? So you say, I want to do a horror convention. So where do you begin?
Well, that is a very broad question that has a lot of answers. How much time do we have?
I'm good at asking really broad questions.
I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. So, now when I say that this is the first convention in Miami, I do mean specifically Miami. I mean, there's there are conventions up in Orlando, Spooky Empire. They've been around a long time. And, a few of us would go to these shows and then we'd talk to people in Miami. It's like, hey, did you go to Orlando? You're a huge horror fan. Go to Spooky Empire. And they're like, I don't go to Orlando. It's amazing how many people in Southeast Florida, they don't go to Orlando. It's like I lived a couple of years in Phoenix, Arizona. I never went to go see the Grand Canyon. Why? I don't know. But it's just this thing that people in Miami largely just sort of stay in Miami. So we decided, listen, let's do this. So a lot of market research, a lot of looking into the market. See, Miami is the 7th largest by metropolitan size area in the country. It's larger than Boston. It's larger than Atlanta. And so we start looking at conventions that happen in these larger metropolitan markets and how big their shows are, what kind of competition do they have in the local, state, and regional areas. So what kind of numbers can we anticipate? So there's a lot of sort of statistical analysis that has to go into this to really understand what kind of a financial commitment that you need to make. Then you start talking to venues, and there are a lot of them in Miami, but Miami is whatever dollar sign things take to make happen across the country, add another dollar sign or two to that because it's Miami, Yeah,
oh yeah. Yeah, it's like LA or San Francisco or New York.
Oh yeah. Exactly. So, we just a lot of phone calls, a lot of meetings, and we found a location that was perfect. You start making deals with hotels, not only to put up your celebrities, but also, people who are coming in to visit. You try to get them a break on a hotel room. So a lot of negotiations with the hotel rooms, or a lot with the hotels. If they have breakout rooms that you can use, and there are little things you never really think of. It's like, if the hotel has a restaurant, am I allowed to bring in my own food for my volunteers? And you got to make sure that you've got the proper event insurance. Heaven forbid somebody trips and falls and breaks their leg at your event, they're going to own your house.
Oh my God! Yes.
So there's just a lot that really does go into this, and thankfully my partner David Chapman, who did the professional wrestling events across the country for many years, he was aware of sort of those nuts and bolts of putting on a large event. And with my experience at Horror Hound, I sort of had the inside on sort of how things in horror conventions work, how the talent managers work and how to get films for a film festival and how to contact vendors, and how to put on different and interesting and fun events at a horror convention. So I just sort of put my chocolate in his peanut butter, and we move forward on it. So
very nice. I like that. I like that. That's a good reference.
For those of you who aren't old enough, that's how Reese's peanut butter cups used to advertise.
Exactly.
I put my chocolate in your peanut butter.
Exactly. Go on YouTube and go find it. You'll find plenty of those old commercials on there. So as you mentioned, it was something that was planned for last year. Obviously, we know 2020 was the year from hell. So I know putting on an event like this is hard enough as it is in just a regular, normal, quote unquote, world. where we don't have pandemics shutting down the world. So here we are now. We're in September of 2021. A lot of us thought we would be well past the world of COVID. It's still lingering. I know Florida is one of the states where it's a little different than most of the country. So in terms of the pandemic, how much has it been weighing on you going into this event? How much have you been concerned with shutdowns, lockdowns, or anything that could maybe hinder this event from happening?
Well, that's it's a major topic every time we have a meeting concerning any aspect of the show. In fact, I just yesterday had a meeting with a doctor that I know in the area and was asking, so what are you seeing? I'm not going to listen to the news. I want to talk to doctors who are working in ERs. So what are you actually seeing? What's actually happening? So, it looks like the Governor DeSantis, is really hyped to sort of get things back to where they were before. I don't want to say normal, but at least to get the economy back to where it was before. So, I don't want to say we're not going to experience any shutdowns, but it's unlikely that that's going to happen. But, within our event, we're going to be putting up hand sanitizing stations. We're definitely encouraging people to wear masks. We're going to be encouraging as much as possible social distancing. Thankfully, we have a large enough venue that we can sort of set it up for that. And just encouraging people to be safe. There have been some other horror conventions in the last couple of months and since things have started opening back up, and we've been watching all of those, and it really doesn't appear that there's been any major backlash following those shows. Regarding COVID cases go up after this event. We really haven't seen much of that in regards to horror conventions, but we're watching it. We want to be as safe as possible.
Of course, yeah, definitely.
Obviously as safe as possible, but if things are starting to come back to life, and we want to do it safely and do it responsibly, and also we're fully aware that this is our first show, so the numbers aren't going to be what they are 5 years from now, 10 years from now. It's going to grow. So planting our foot in the soil, or I should say in the sand, in Miami for a horror convention. It's likely going to be a smaller event this year anyway, so let's go ahead and do it and keep everybody safe, and then we have just room to grow from here.
Copy that. Yeah, I hear you. I know you do the best you can, right? And everybody's everybody's paying attention anyway, so it's like you just do your due diligence, everybody. So let's get into the fun part, the actual event itself.
Yeah, let's talk about fun stuff.
Yeah, let's talk about fun stuff. Enough of this other stuff. So let's talk about the guest list. So I know, unfortunately, Kane Hodder is not able to make the event. But you do have a great list of folks. So let's talk about who's going to be there.
Oh, gladly. So, because Miami is a very multicultural town, we tried to emulate that as much as we could. So we've got some very well known names. So from like any of your fans who follow Rob Zombie films, we've got Richard Brake from 31 and 3 from Hell. He was also the Night King in the Game of Thrones. We've got Pancho Moeller, who was in 31 and 3 from Hell. We've got Jeff Daniel Phillips, who was in a slew of Rob Zombie movies. He was also one of the Geico cavemen, if you remember the Geico commercials.
Oh, my gosh,
really cool to meet him because of those commercials were awesome, right?
Yes.
And then we've got a crossover. Dave Sheridan is coming. He was Officer Doofy in Scream, but he was also in Devil's Rejects. He was the sheriff deputy in that. So got the Rob Zombie stuff kind of nailed down, and we definitely wanted to get that because when he comes to Miami, his tickets sell out, right? So But we've also got Felissa Rose from Sleepaway Camp. We've got Lloyd Kaufman coming in from Trauma. He's going to be doing his one-man sort of master class on filmmaking at Sinister Nights.
Oh, wow. That's going to be awesome. Right? That's going to be so great.
Uncle Lloyd's amazing, right? But you know what's so we got Lynn Lowry, we've got Tiffany Shepard, we've got Michael Berryman. We got some old school guys. This is something I'll get into in just a minute. But we got a couple of filmmakers that may not be quite as known, at least today. But William Griffey, who made a lot of films down in Miami in the early to mid 60s, who's making films with Herschel Gordon Lewis, the Godfather of gore. Everybody knows Herschel. And something that we didn't realize when we started planning this, but Blood Feast, which is considered the first gore film, was shot entirely in Miami. And come to find out that most of Herschel Gordon Lewis's gore exploitation films were shot here in Miami. So I go out about talking to horror fans in Miami. We're meeting them everywhere. I'm like, hey, man, you realize that Miami is the birthplace of gore. Horror wouldn't look like what it looks today if it wasn't for Miami. So we're going to be screening Blood Feast, and we're going to be doing a panel on what Miami has meant to the horror genre. And William Griffey, there aren't that many people alive who were making films in Miami back in the day, but William Griffey is still with us. And then Fred Olen Ray, who made a lot of great B-horror movies in the 80s, who is from South Florida and knows a lot about the horror scene from the 60s in South Florida. They're both going to be at the show and then joining us on a panel discussion on that. So really excited to bring Miami a presentation on, this is where our home fits in the history of horror.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's awesome. I totally forgot that Blood Feast was in Miami. I totally forgot.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Yeah.
And then, and then we've got Ariel Levy, who was one of the main key played at Alejandro in Green Inferno. But more importantly, he is a huge movie and TV star in the Latino community. He's starred in a lot of Spanish-speaking horror films and a lot of Spanish-speaking sitcoms. So he's a name that most Caucasian Americans maybe not be terribly familiar with him, but if you're a Latino, he's very well known. So again, and then Pancho Moller kind of breaches the Latino community as well. So again, we're trying to be sort of embracing to the community that we're in, and give something to everybody.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that what a great opportunity to do that. I'm also looking on your website right now. You have some, of course, 80s. Once I hear 80s, I'm there. So you got the 80s Monster Prom.
Yeah, that's Saturday night.
That's awesome.
That's one event that we're actually selling separate tickets to, because 80s. Miami, there's always somebody putting on a big party in Miami. Every weekend, there's some kind of big party going on somewhere. So we are advertising that. You can buy tickets to that separately, but it's going to be what it sounds like, a prom with monsters. And we're showing, good. We're not playing 80s music. We're showing 80s music videos.
Even better.
So
even better.
You get to see the video and listen to the music. And we do have the obligatory really ugly balloon arch. We will be taking Polaroids so you can get your ugly prom picture while you're at the 80s Monster Prom. Because it's Miami, we are offering VIP experience and bottle service. If you want to have the VIP experience at the 80s Monster Prom, the only thing we require is you turn your mental clock back to the 80s and come dressed appropriately. So
I love that. That is so great.
And then staying on the 80s, on Saturday morning, we're showing Saturday morning cartoons. We're showing an episode of Scooby-Doo. We're showing an episode of The Real Ghostbusters. We're showing an episode of The Addams Family. And then I think an episode of the old Godzilla cartoon, I think. I need to check with the programmer on that. But we're encouraging people to show up in your pajamas. We're going to offer cereal. You can sit on the floor in your pajamas and watch Saturday morning cartoons. Now, how 80s is that?
That is just too cool. I may have to fly out to Miami just to do that.
Come on down, man. Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. That's great.
Yeah. So one thing that we've noticed in the years that I've gone to conventions, worked with conventions, typically you go to a convention, you meet the celebs you want to meet, you get the autographs and the pictures you want to get. Then you go through the vendor hall and you kind of buy the stuff you want to buy, and there might be a panel or two that you want to check out. But, quite often, if you've been to many horror conventions, you see a lot of people sitting on the floor in hallways, We're trying to remedy that. So every hour there will be, and this is planned out throughout the weekend, every hour there will be at least 3 things going on at any given moment. And they're all different things. We have the film fest going all weekend. We've got panels, workshops, presentations, Q&As. We're doing if you remember the $10,000 pyramid, remember that old game show? Oh
yeah, definitely.
Well,
yes.
We're doing a replication of that where we've got celebrities that people can play against. And doing the whole $10,000 pyramid. We're calling it celebrity match game because we can't call it $10,000 pyramid.
Yeah.
And we're doing a Scream Queen Olympics. Felissa Rose is going to guest judge the Scream Queen Olympics that has events like, we have the thing that registers how loud something is. Measures the decibels, the decibel meter.
Yep.
Yeah. So people scream into the decibel meter. Obviously, loudest scream gets you, some high points. But also, you got to sell your performance. But there's also a drag a dead body. We've got a 150-pound test dummy that's going to be dragged. It's a girl dragging her boyfriend out of the house, and then we've got an obstacle course that has to be navigated. So we actually have gold, silver, and bronze medals for the Scream Queen Olympics, and it being Miami, and I love this. I love this. We actually have some drag queens that are signing up for this because it's Miami.
Yeah. And
how more fitting would it be than if we crown our first Scream Queen that's actually a queen, right? So I love that. Oh gosh, I don't even know where to begin nor end with all the stuff that's going on.
There's a ton of stuff. One of the things that I wanted to ask about is the Sin Film Festival. Absolutely.
Very, very excited about this. Again, I've been the director of film festivals for a very long time, and this particular iteration of my tenure is probably got me one of the more exciting events. Now, kind of back up for a second. We were going to do Sinister Nights last year, and along with the Sin Film Fest, but we had to cancel, obviously, the convention. But I had a lot of great films lined up for the Sin Film Festival. So we actually had the Sin Film Festival last year in October, over Halloween weekend, at a small, independently owned theater in Fort Lauderdale called Savor Cinema. They gave us a home. And we practiced all the social distancing, all the masking. Obviously, not a whole lot of people showed up, but we did get these films out there. And because, in all honesty, I couldn't hold on to these films for an entire year while we moved everything to 2021, right? So Sin Film Fest began in 2020. We called it Original Sin. We're playing on the whole 7 Deadly Sins. In fact, our awards for the Sin Film Festival are based on the 7 Deadly. There's the Gluttony Award, the Lust Award, the Pride Award. Yeah. So, but we've got some great films lined up in competition and some great films lined up out of competition. The in competition films largely are short films. We do have some features that are in competition, but we've got films from all over the world. I've got my first film, again, since I have been a director of film festivals, I got my first film from Africa that was not a film from Egypt or South Africa. So like Central Africa, we've got a horror film from Ghana, which is incredible.
Wow.
We've got horror films from Turkey. We've got several from Iran, and that's a side note comment because I don't know what has happened in Iran, but the last 3 or 4 years, the quality of the horror films that are coming out of Iran are ridiculous.
Really?
I'm sure it's because better film equipment became available to them, but just it's gone through the roof, both in production value and in storytelling. It's amazing. But yes, we got films from all over the world. We've got a feature film from India that was made for a Western audience. India's been making horror films for years, but they've been made mostly for an Indian audience. And the way they tell their stories, the way the flow of the plot progresses and such is a little different than how we tell stories here. But this film, The Hauntings of Madhya Pradesh, has been made for a Western audience, and I'm really excited to screen that. We also are screening now. We're screening Blood Feast. We're going to be screening Vinegar Syndrome is one of our sponsors, so we're screening a title from them. We got the gore cut of Tammy and the T-Rex. We're excited to screen that.
Yeah.
Lloyd Kaufman is bringing the original Toxic Avenger. We're screening that sort of in excited celebration. Nice. For the new. They're reintroducing the franchise of Toxie. And Lynn Lowry, we got a title of hers. She'll be a guest at the show. We're screening her latest film called Cynthia. Also stars Bill Moseley and Sid Haig and Scout Taylor Compton. It's a fun title. And we're getting very excited about this. Just recently nailed this down. We're getting a documentary called The History of Metal and Horror.
Ooh, got my attention.
It's a fantastic documentary. It's narrated by Michael Behrman, and we're very excited he'll be at the show. And this documentary has got everybody. I mean, everybody. This guy's been working on this thing for a long time. Meaning, like Gunnar Hansen appears in this documentary, and I'll let you know how long he's been working on this.
Wow.
But Alice Cooper, Rob Zombie, members of Anthrax, Mustaine, Dave Mustaine, so on and on. It's an amazing documentary.
Oh, that's awesome.
We're excited about that one. Yeah.
So you got a lot of stuff going on here.
We got a lot of stuff going on here, man.
That's great.
And the beauty of it too is, so for the last couple of years that I've been doing Film Fest back in the Midwest, we had to screen everything in a ballroom, which is very typical for a horror convention film fest. But the James L. Knight Convention Center has its own 440 seat theater, so we're not in ballrooms anymore. Those days are behind us. So very excited to give the full theatrical experience to the visiting filmmakers.
That's great.
As well.
Hey, so really quickly, well, first of all, for those that want to find Sinister Nights, just go to sinisternights.com. That's the website.
It's that simple.
And we love that. Really quickly before I let you go, back in 2017, you won the Rondo Award for your interview with Cassandra Peterson, otherwise known as Elvira. Congratulations!
I sure did. Yeah, thank you very much, man. That was
So did you?
It was an amazing experience.
Because I was always curious. Do you actually get? What do you get? Do you get the actual Rondo head? Does the bust show up?
Yeah. It's about 5 or 6 inches tall. Little Rondo head sitting on my shelf in my office.
That is awesome.
Yeah, and I tell you, it was awesome, but nothing could compare to that time that I got to spend with Cassandra and really dive into. We went into some thick stuff with her history, and she's an amazing human being with an amazing story, and quote unquote Elvira is only part of the amazing story that is Cassandra Peterson. So yeah.
Well, congratulations on that.
Thanks.
That is awesome. I've been fortunate enough to have the show. We were nominated back in 2009 for a Rondo Award. I didn't even know about it. I found it online by mistake. I'm like, oh, the show's nominated. But I was always curious about what you got when you won. So that's awesome. Really, congratulations. That's such a great thing to get.
I appreciate it.
And listen, I'm really happy for all of your success over these years. And if anybody wants to follow you, or if they want to follow Sinister Nights, we already gave the website sinisternights.com. But if people want to follow you, I know you're on Slasher because that's how we reconnected. Where can they find you there?
Yeah. I'm actually, it's just me, Jason. I think it's Jason.Hignite, or just Jason Hignite, all one word. I don't have any fancy nicknames or anything. It's impossible for my friends to find me. So it's just my name, and I got nothing to hide. So here I am. Find me on Slasher. Find me on Instagram. Find me on Twitter. Find me on Facebook. I'm all over all of those, and you can link to Sinister Nights through all of that stuff. And Sinister Nights is also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, on and on. So yeah, come find me, man. I love talking to horror fans, and this is not what I do for a living. This is what I do for a passion. and the passion is strong. That's why I'm still doing it.
That's awesome. Jason Hignite, you've been hearing him for the last half hour or so. He is the co-producer of Sinister Nights, as well as the director of the Sin Film Festival. Jason, it was so great reconnecting with you here on the program. Thanks again for coming back, and cannot wait to have you back again once we get that horror host. What is it?
The physical location. Yes.
Cannot wait for that. So,
come hell or high water, I will make that happen.
Awesome.
Trying too hard.
If anybody can get it done, I know it's you. So, best of luck with that, and I can't wait to have you come back again. Congratulations with everything, and best of luck with Sinister Nights.
Well, thanks, Caretaker. I'll go crawl back in my grave again.
And as I put this interview to rest, it was so awesome reconnecting with Jason. He's such a great guy and such a hard worker, and he's just when I tell you that people haven't stopped talking about the Vampire Tribute, they have not. And you can find videos online from that event. It was from 2009, and there was some great stuff. Plus, they did the 100 years of monster movies. They had that streaming site that was up for a while. I mean, just listen to everything that he's putting together. That they're putting together for this event. It's just great. So check it out. Sinister Nights coming to Miami. Let's make this an annual thing. As I begin to close down the graveyard, I mentioned at the top of the show about Catacombs of Horror. So those of you that aren't familiar with it, Catacombs of Horror is a show that I do exclusively on the Graveyard Show Podcast YouTube channel. And right now it was just the one episode that I did. It's What Best Represents 1980s Horror, and it's myself and David Weiner, the director of In Search of Darkness Parts 1, 2, and coming soon 3. We discuss what best represents 1980s horror in a couple of different categories. It's not an interview show, it's a discussion. And the reason why I created Catacombs of Horror goes back to when I was listening to my old shows from 9 and 10. When I used to do those podcasts, the interviews were just a small portion of the show. It was a lot of me just yammering on and talking about stuff, whether it's news or stuff that I came across. And sometimes I would talk like 45 minutes before even getting to the interview. So I was very long-winded back in those days. I did not want to do that on this new show. A friend gave me some really good advice, and I heeded that advice, and it was excellent advice. Keep it short. So I still wanted to talk about horror stuff. So I thought, why not create a different show that's not a podcast, that's a video that's on YouTube. So if you go to the Graveyard Show Podcast YouTube channel, there's a playlist, Catacombs of Horror, and that's where these shows will live. So it's been a while since I've done one. And the second show is up and ready to go. And this one is about my favorite scenes from the horror movie Count Yorga Vampire. One of my favorite vampire movies, one of my favorite horror movies of all time. A great B-movie vampire movie, but there's more to it there. And I get into the different scenes that really have me coming back for more every time I want to watch the movie. Sometimes I just skip right to those scenes. So check it out. It's Catacombs of Horror, favorite scenes, Count Yorga Vampire. The Graveyard Show Podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and everywhere podcasts exist. And as I just mentioned, YouTube as well, Graveyard Show Podcast. And if you want to connect with the show on Slasher, at Graveyard Show Podcast is where you can find the program. And the email address, once again, gyspodcast@gmail.com. All right, my friends, enjoy the rest of your summer. We will reconvene soon. And as you exit the graveyard, I would like to remind you to please lock the gate behind you. We wouldn't want anyone to get out. Until next time.